On our last episode, we talked about foods that we should try to eat. Now I want to talk about the top 5 foods that we should avoid. So if you're interested on finding out what foods that we shouldn't be eating, then please continue watching. There are so many different diets out there on the internet for autoimmune diseases. You can see people advocating for different diets for arthritis, for multiple sclerosis, lupus, thyroid disease, and rashes. People are even attacking each other to back up the dietary stance. But what foods should we truly be avoiding to lower our chance of having inflammation, and more specifically, chronic inflammation? Is there one diet that fits all for autoimmune diseases? What does the science say? And that's what we're going to be talking about on today's episode. So the first category of foods that we should all be avoiding are ultra-processed foods. Now, all dietary plans will agree with me that ultra-processed foods have to go. But before I describe what ultra-processed foods, we have to talk about what processed foods are, because they're different from ultra-processed foods. Minimally processed foods are foods that come in its natural forms, such as apples, corn, potatoes, carrots, and strawberries, for example. Processed foods are foods such as canned corn because it went through the canning process, or apple juice because it went through the juicing process. And those can still be relatively okay. Now, ultra-processed foods are foods that have gone through the process very heavily, and those are the foods that we do want to avoid, such as corn chips, potato chips, apple pies, french fries, carrot cakes, and also cookies as well. Ultra-processed foods are made from a lot of fats, starches, and refined sugars. Other types of ultra-processed foods include hot dogs, cakes, salty snacks, and soft drinks. According to this study, it shows that ultra-processed foods made up of 58% of energy intake in the USA, and 89% of that energy came from added sugars. So that's a bit way too much of ultra-processed foods that's being consumed in the USA today. That's why a lot of people are developing more chronic diseases and also autoimmune diseases, because it's a result of chronic inflammation, and our dietary choices do play a huge impact in that. Now, food group number 2 that I highly recommend avoiding are fried foods. Fried foods have a lot of trans fats and saturated fats in them, and the oils that are being used at such a high temperature, it causes a lot of oxidative stress when we consume them, and a lot of inflammation as well. Also, advanced glycation end products, also called as AGE, are a result of a reaction between sugars and proteins and fats. And studies have shown that advanced glycation end products can lead to more inflammation. And what types of foods have the most advanced glycation end products? Those are fried foods. So we have to minimize the amount of fried foods we're eating. If we eat a lot of fried foods, it would contribute to chronic inflammation. And that's another reason why we are getting sick in the world and in the USA, because of the foods we're eating. A lot of these fried foods in a lot of places. Yes, do I like to eat fried foods? Yeah, they're tasty. I'm just like you. I'm just like every other person. They're fried, they're crispy, they're salty, they're so tasty, but they're so detrimental to our health. I really try to avoid them as much as possible, because if I eat them multiple days in a row, I will be in pain from my arthritis. The third food group that I have to talk about are refined sugars. Refined sugars are killing us in the world. Refined sugars are found in baked goods, soft drinks, and candy, and other sources as well. They are an addicting food source. Have you ever noticed that when you drink your soft drink, you can't stop drinking it, and you have to finish the whole can or the whole cup? Or when you eat candy, you just can't have one. You gotta have multiple of them, because they're so addicting. They are very satisfying to our brain and our body. Our dopamine levels go up a lot when we consume these foods. And high fructose corn syrup is one of the biggest culprits, and it's so detrimental to our health. Other sugar sources are glucose, fructose, and also sucrose as well. It's important to minimize these sugars if we are to avoid chronic inflammation, or at least give our bodies a chance to avoid chronic inflammation, because chronic inflammation is contributing to chronic diseases. So if we want to minimize lupus flares, multiple sclerosis flares, arthritis flares, psoriasis flares, we do want to avoid refined sugars as much as possible. So when you're at home, try not to buy the cookies, the cakes, and the canned soft drinks as well. I always tell my patients, look, if you're at a party, just try your best to avoid them as much as possible. If you do have one once in a while, it's not the end of the world, but definitely don't bring them inside the home. If my wife or my family buys it and brings it in the home, I will personally have a hard time avoiding it. I have to be mentally strong to avoid these foods because they're so tasty, but they're so inflammatory. They make me sick. So I try to avoid it as much as possible. And here's a picture of how dietary sugars can cause different autoimmune diseases over a long term, and this was from a scientific article. So please do your best to avoid them as much as is tempting. I want to talk about dairy here, and I personally try to avoid dairy as much as I can. I've seen in my patients that dairy can contribute to autoimmune flares. I don't think the science is very strong at this time saying that dairy contributes to chronic inflammation or causes a direct consequence of elevated inflammatory markers. But in the autoimmune population, dairy has been a culprit for potential autoimmune disease flares. Now, I can't prove to you that dairy is a direct cause of someone's autoimmune disease onset, but it can contribute to flares. Could it be in the casein protein or the whey protein in it? We don't currently know. Now, there are studies here recently that show that dairy doesn't cause an increased systemic inflammation through different immune biomarkers as shown in this study. However, I think over time, we may potentially find studies that show that it can contribute to autoimmune diseases. I personally try to avoid it as much as possible. Now, drinking cow milk and dairy is different than eating dairy yogurt. Dairy yogurt has probiotics, and there are some studies out there that show that they do help with the gut microbiome. However, I always tell my patients as much as possible, just try to eat plant-based yogurts because they're still fermented and you're avoiding the dairy aspect of it because it can make patients flare. So I just try to minimize that as much as possible, and I tell my patients as well, just try to minimize dairy. So that is another potential food group I try to avoid. Now, number 5 might be surprising to you, and some of you out there eat a lot of this, and that is salt. Now, salt by itself is okay. Salt is needed for us to survive. In our labs, we always measure salt as an electrolyte. However, a high salt diet can be very detrimental to the body and it can lead to more inflammation. Now, the USDA does recommend a dietary intake minimum of 1 teaspoon a day, or also known as 2,300 milligrams per day. Now, if you're eating out or eat at fast food restaurants or eating ultra processed foods that I just talked about, you're probably getting a lot more than 2,300 milligrams per day. So I really encourage you to eat at home as much as possible, minimize oil and salt intake. Now, I'm not telling you to not salt your foods because if you don't salt your foods, it's not very tasty sometimes. So I do recommend if you do salt to taste, but do not over salt your food. Be very mindful of how much salt you're putting into your food. There are multiple studies out there that show that high salt intake does lead to more inflammation and potentially more potential flares of autoimmune diseases. And there are multiple studies out there that show that high salt diets can contribute to worsening multiple sclerosis, worsening lupus, and also worsening arthritis as well. So be very mindful of salt intake. I know I've mentioned 5 food groups already, but I just want to mention this last food group, and that is processed meats. Processed meats include hot dogs, ham, deli meat, and these foods are so high in salt, and also they can be carcinogenic and lead to more inflammation as well. So do as much as you can to avoid these processed meats. The WHO has already called these processed meats carcinogenic already. I try to avoid it as much as possible. Actually, I don't eat it at all, and that includes bacon as well. So if you are eating these foods, please be very mindful. I encourage you to eat 0 amount of these foods because they are so inflammatory. If you're gonna eat meat, at least eat meat that's more lean, such as chicken or turkey, and avoid these highly processed meats. And one last food group, I know I've talked about the 5 food groups I talked about with processed meats, but now you're probably wondering, why hasn't Dr. Yu talked about gluten at all? Isn't gluten super inflammatory? Shouldn't all autoimmune disease patients avoid gluten? I will tell you, not all autoimmune patients should be avoiding gluten. Should some patients avoid gluten with autoimmune disease? Yes. I have patients that flare with gluten. I personally don't flare with gluten. I think gluten in whole grains can be very beneficial. When you cut out gluten, then you're avoiding a lot of B vitamins as well. Gluten processed food is very unhealthy, but gluten in whole foods can be healthy. Now you're probably asking me, doesn't gluten cause leaky gut? Well, yes, from the work of Dr. Fasano and his published studies, gluten can lead to leaky gut. Does that clinically mean that someone will develop autoimmune disease and have flares? And leaky gut is not just from food and gluten. It can be from stress, from over-exercising, from being severely overweight, malnourished. There are a lot of different things that can lead to leaky gut. Even environmental toxins can lead to leaky gut. So gluten is not always the culprit here. Every individual, as I state over and over again in this channel, is unique. So one patient with autoimmune disease can flare with gluten, but another patient with autoimmune disease may not flare with gluten. I have patients in both camps. My recommendation is if you think gluten is causing issues, just try cutting out for 2 months, because it takes about 2 months for this gluten to leave your body. So just cut out for 2 months, see how you do. You can always slowly reintroduce it into your body, into your diet, and if you don't have any flares or complications, then maybe gluten isn't your problem. Gluten can lead to a number of different symptoms such as brain fog, more joint pain, headaches. Gluten isn't just celiac disease. That's what people usually think about, but you can have non-celiac gluten sensitivity where your biopsy and your endoscopy and your labs are negative, but you're still having headaches, you feel weird, you feel like you're having a flu when you eat gluten. That's non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So just be very mindful of how your body reacts to gluten. Now, I want to end with the fact that if you eat some of these foods that can produce inflammation, it isn't the end of the world. I eat these foods sometimes, and you just gotta be very mindful. You don't bring this stuff at home. If you're out at parties, then sometimes, like birthday party, it's on the table, it's hard to avoid it sometimes, right? Don't punish yourself for that. Just see it as a treat that you have once in a while. Every individual is unique, and every individual has their own path in this journey. So just do the best you can. So if you like this video, please hit the like or subscribe button and comment below what foods make you flare and make you feel worse. See you next time.